All right, rock and roll.
All right. I'm going to give you a little history of sparkling wine where I get the screens up and going. But I believe that a lot of wine styles and almost everything that we eat or drink was kind of based on necessity rather than because of what we exactly wanted. You know, and a lot of times accidents happened. Because honestly, like, think about some of the foods that we eat. Like, who would eat moldy cheese unless you had to? It's not something that you would go out and really go, yeah, because we were trained, we like it. But then maybe it was just like, oh, we have to eat it because we want food and this is all we have. And then eventually develop a taste for it. I love moldy cheese, so I'm just saying. But things like hakarl, which is like the fermented shark that they do in Iceland, that is just really repugnant. But that's just something that, you know, is the standard because it's what they could do to preserve food. Well, I think sparkling wine is also just a generalized accident, and we've just evolved it over the years. And so, from a functional sense, what happened is that I told you before that sweet wines were always the most prized because it was really hard to stop the ferment. We didn't have refrigeration. We didn't know they were yeast. We just knew that if we made grape juice, that it would turn into something, either wine or vinegar. And on a long enough timeline, all grape juice becomes vinegar anyway. All wine on a long enough timeline becomes vinegar. You don't have a choice. Just kind of go that way. So, kind of as we go back in history, like it cracks me up, like the religious fundamentalist sects that like think that the wine in the Bible was grape juice. I'm like, first off, have you ever been to the Middle East where these books were written? And then also, why would Jesus have made wine as one of his miracles at the wedding at Cana? Because nobody wants grape juice at a wedding. People want to get lit and have a good time. I mean, and so the references in the Bible of wine are probably very significant because we've been using it for a long time. Now, if you go back to that time, you go to the Middle East without sanitation, without anything, and I want you to tell me how long grape juice stays grape juice. I'm going to give you 2 to 3 days, at most. At best. That's as good as you're going to get before it goes off and takes off. They didn't have sulfur. They didn't make grape juice. The next thing you know, it's fermenting. And then they're drinking it because that's just how it worked then. Damn it, that's the way it was and we liked it. So, so most wines went dry. And we've figured out ways over the years, over the last few thousand years, to make some sweeter wines. Some wines we learned how to start doing fortification around 1100s, around 1,000 years ago. We started figuring out how to add spirits. We figured out how to make spirits, and then we dumped it back in the wine. We dumped it back in. We could arrest fermentation and slow down the aging of the wine. Primarily, they did it to slow down aging. But I think the history of champagne and sparkling is that somebody made wine, and then the next year they dumped some grape juice back in it to sweeten it up to make it taste good, and it got fizzy again. And the sparkling wine we drink today is vastly different than anything we even drank 50 years ago. And a good chunk of that has to do with technology. So if you think about some key things, we've only been using corks in wine for 300 years. Like, I think this is a very short period of time. And then we only had glass, and even decent glass, for not very long. But we were doing like little pieces of pottery that we put the wine in, and then it was like a piece of wax cloth on top. So imagine how much pressure that could hold, not very much. Those sparkling wines would have been very modestly at best sparkling. And then we got glass, and I think Dom Perignon, that's his claim to fame. He didn't invent sparkling. We talk about him like he was the great person that figured it out, but his major claim to fame was that he figured out how to make a wire cage to hold the corks in. That was his claim to fame. So when you put the wire cage on and the cork stayed in the bottles, the pressure went up and they became more sparkly. Yay. And then sparkling wine didn't get a whole lot better until really it was driven by a woman, Madame Foucault. And her butler, because you couldn't really get remarried back then, they had a thing. And they liked to get drunk and do silly stuff. And one night they cut the kitchen table in half and drilled holes in it, and that's how we have riddling racks that we have today. So a lot of the inventions are just driven out of time. But I can assure you that even the sparkling wine we have today is totally different from anything we had even 30 or 40 years ago, because our glass technology has gotten so much better. So there is a lot of history and a lot of things from the region, but the teas just aren't coming on. So I don't know why they don't turn on, but I'm not smarter than the machine. So even now, I would say the sparkling wine has evolved significantly just in my lifetime, and how much it's changed in quality. It's just a totally different animal. And we keep changing it. And what's really cool about sparkling wine is, what I like about it, it isn't as defined. Like, we kind of have these more rigid outlines for wine styles, but no, stop! Can't get it up, huh? I'm gonna pause my recording. Oh, it said it did a thing. Let's try a thing. We do
signal, please check input signal on connection.
Extend. Hit the little button that says all play. Yeah, I saw it.
So it says it's not.
What's it? Plug it down here.
Yeah, that's what the 16. So 10 is when the shade is supposed to be. Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Pause this.
Yeah.
Less for me to cut out. There we go. Anyway, I'll keep going. Sparkling wine is not like, it's wine, but it's not wine. It's its own animal. It requires totally different equipment. So if you have a winery and you think you're going to go make sparkling wine, don't. Because it's a whole different beverage. We use some of the same equipment. There's a lot of things that are the same on the front end, in terms of pressing grapes, in terms of producing base wines. But the difference is in all the other equipment you need to have to be able to make it. It just is a different animal. So that's why most wineries are sparkling wine houses, or they're still wine houses. Very few cross over to both. And I would say that most still wine houses that have a sparkling wine have it made somewhere else. So the big one in California is a place called Rack and Riddle. They make it for everybody. Up in Washington, we have a place called Ancient Lakes that does a lot of forced carbonated wines. We have a place called Four Feathers that does traditional method. They'll do it in large volumes for you. And then we have a place called Winery Services in Walla Walla that does kind of like Barra, where they have their own line and they do everything. If you want to show up, and you can either show up with base wine, you can show up with finished bottles, and they'll charge you a price to degorge and finish them for you. And it's fairly expensive. It's not an inexpensive process because everything is a lot more manual, and the other side that's kind of expensive is the bottles are a lot more expensive, and then you've got the big heavy corks and things like that. So from an input standpoint, the packaging is much more expensive. The upside to sparkling wine is what's inside the bottle is fairly inexpensive to make. I don't know. Should we just go to the other room?
How much is a bottle of like a regular bottle for, say, red wine versus a champagne wine?
Should we just go over there? Because if not, we're gonna run out of time.
Yeah. It's just over.
We've already killed 20 minutes just trying to start this thing.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not gonna repeat this tomorrow, which I am. Here we go. Rock and roll. All right. So, a couple quick things. In general, there's many ways to make sparkling wine. There's no right way. There's a bunch of different ways to get to it. They all just do different stuff. Two main styles, the traditional method and tank method. Those are the main ones. But forced carbonated wines are getting very popular because they're very easy to make, and we now have the bottling lines to do them. So a lot of the really inexpensive, like $15, $10 to $15 sparkling wines in the store, like $10, those are all just forced carbonated wine, just like soda. So other types that we do is transfer method, method ancestral, / pet nat, and forced carb. So I'm gonna move through pretty quick. These are in your in the drive, so we're just gonna kind of go over them pretty quick. But the big ones I want to hit on is assemblage, which is when we put our blend together. So most sparkling wine, especially champagne, is not from a single vintage. It's from all over. So they go and buy different wines and blend them together to make the same taste year in and year out. That's why sparkling wines are really consistent, because they get to mix everything together. There's no like, gotta use the year, gotta use, I mean, they do vintage champagnes, and in good years they do it, but it's not always the case. B just basically means where the bubble forms from. Blanc de Blanc sounds fancy, everything sounds fancier in French, but it just means white from white. Blanc de Noir means white from black, because it's from black grapes. Cremant is a very lightly sparkling wine. Most famous Cremants in the world come from Alsace. That's their style of sparkling wine. But they typically are done in a traditional method, but they can be Charmat as well. And then Cuvée. Cuvée sounds so fancy. People call their wine Cuvée all the time. Cuvée just means tank. You know? So it's basically your tank full or tub full, but man, it sounds so much fancier. Degorgement or disgorging, that's the process of popping the yeast plug out. We won't do that until this summer. Dosage, same, this dosage here, we dose the wine. So after you make the wine and you finish it, you can come back and you can add sweetnesses, liquors, flavors, all kinds of other stuff to polish up a wine. So if you want to talk about wines that you can, I mean, the most manipulated wines are sparkling wines by far. There's just nothing that comes close. You're dealing with blending across multiple vintages. You're dealing with the ability to re-ferment and add different amounts of pressure, and then you get to add a different flavoring at the end. So you get all these different things to add different flavor. And then they got the champenois, the aroma that comes from champagne. Liqueur d'expedition, which is what they used to do back in the day, is to make sure that the wine could travel a long way. Not only did they dose with sugar, they usually added some alcohol too. So a lot of the original sparkling wines actually had brandy in them as well. They were slightly fortified. Liqueur de tirage, we made that yesterday. That means the sugar, remember the sugar in the bucket that I put hot water in? Yeah. That's it. It's the sugar, it's the sugar syrup. Marc, now Marc's an interesting term because that's how they measure it. The French love to define everything. They love rules. They are just the biggest fans of making rules and regulations. They make rules and regulations about how to make rules and regulations.
You can't pass kindergarten unless you can color inside the lines.
Oh, I wouldn't have made that one.
Ooh la la.
But Marc is 4,000 kilograms. All the presses in Champagne are designed to hold 1 Marc. In true Champagne, they hold 4,000 pounds. They hold about 8,800 pounds of fruit. And they're usually basket pressed. Really good Champagne is pressed in a basket. I mean, that's considered the best. Mousse just sounds so much better in French. It just means foam. Yeah, I always thought it was funny, like in the 80s, like everybody was using mousse in their hair. And at the end of the day, it's just you're putting foam in your hair. Petulant. The term petulant, like you petulant little child, you know, you can picture a witch saying that. That means bubbly. I would love it if somebody called me petulant. That'd be lovely. That means I'm a bubbly person. I don't even know how to say this word, so I never say it right. Poupit. Okay, thank you. I'll leave on you. So yeah, those are the racks that the riddling racks. Ramage is the process. Normally we used to do it where you turn the bottles. Now we don't do that. We have gyro pallets. Or if you use really good adjuvants, you just put the bottles upside down in a box and go kick them every now and then, and then the yeast settles. And then I'm going to just leave that. The rest doesn't matter because it's not that important. So I'm talking about traditional method. Basically, what you do, this is the old school, you make a base wine. Base wine is usually 10 to 12% alcohol, and then you add some sugar, you add some yeast, you put it in a bottle, and then you let the fermentation happen. Again, a second fermentation in a bottle with a very specified amount of sugar. And then after some period of time, you riddle the bottles down. So when you bottle, and the bottles will be on their sides, because we want the yeast to be in a big wide bed on the bottom, so that can easily ferment the wine. It's a really stressful situation. On top of that, when the yeast break down, it flavors the wine again. So that's part of the magic of sparkling wine. And once you have sparkling wine in a bottle, it's pretty much immortal. Once it's underground, immortal.
So like
Forever.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's under CO2, there's no oxygen getting in, it's under a crown seal, no oxygen getting in, and it's got microbes there that keep sucking up oxygen, they're kind of hanging out in the background. So sparkling wines, you can go find. I mean, I've been to, hey, you made it. No, don't be sorry. The little one doing okay? Okay, good. You can go, and I've been to sparkling wine houses that have, bottles of wine stacked that are, close to 100 years old in their cellars that are still just hanging out, waiting to be degorged. That's kind of fun. And you can, a lot of places you can go and get your birth year, and they'll degorge it for you, of your vintage from your year of your birth. It's kind of cool stuff. And so once that's on its side, then you do it from Sur Lee, which is the lees are on the side, to Sur Point. You turn it upside down, and all the lees slide into the neck of the bottle. Then what happens is we freeze the neck of the bottle, and when that neck freezes, the yeast plug stays, stuck. You turn the bottle upright, you pop the cap off, and out comes the top. It pops off. And it's a really good way to put out an eye if you're not careful, because these things are under a lot of pressure. Then after that, you add some sugar, you top it up, you cork it, boom, you finish it off.
Did you know the average speed of a cork is 25 miles per hour when you're...
Interesting. No, I did not know that. I've never measured it, but I do like to pop the cork. That's, but then my daughter, we pop the cork and then into the backyard, especially all winter, and then she'd go collect the fairy stools in the spring, which were all the corks after they kind of expanded, and then she'd make little things around the yard for fairies out of corks. Yeah, that's a good way of saying I'm an alcoholic. Anyway, so here's your basic base wine. Then, depending on how much sugar you add, you get different levels of bubble. So we can get pretty precise with that. If you do 15 to 18 grams a liter, that's like cider or pet nat. There's that lightly bubble. That being said, I've seen plenty of people making pet nats that don't know what they're doing, and I've seen them basically blow their hands off. And then 20 to 24 grams a liter is champagne, or kind of in that Prosecco range. 25 plus, and you kind of end up with a bubble. So one of the struggles with making sparkling wine is you've got to get your sugar just right. There are many cases that I have heard of and been witness to where they accidentally doubled the amount of sugar and didn't pay attention and went to bottle. There was a case in Australia where they bottled it immediately put them in the riddling racks in a cave because it looks cool. But the problem was that they doubled the sugar, and what was happening is the crown seals would come off, and it would be a rocket, but then it would hit the one on the other side of the cave, and then there'd be a chain reaction for a while that would happen. But they couldn't send anybody really in to go fix it. So they called the local rifle club to come down and shoot all the bottles out of their cave, and then go clean it up. So, how very Australian. Traditional method wines are made all over, everywhere. There's, they make it in England now, because it's getting warm enough there, and it's the same shelf as France, so they make some sparkling wine in England. Of course, Champagne is the spiritual home, the place. And then we have the Cremants from Alsace, Francocorda, we have Cavas in Spain, and then there's other really high quality sparkling wines from all over. Some of the best sparkling wine I've had in my entire life comes out of Tasmania, and I actually think that the best sparkling wines in the world are currently being made in Tasmania. because it's a cooler climate and it's closer to what Champagne was originally. And so it's becoming like the premier place to do sparkling wine. You better like acid though. I mean, you gotta be like the wine, even the reds down there, the Pinots are like, they're 10 grams of acid. They are just absolutely lit. But if I could live anywhere in the world, it would be Tasmania. Tasmania is one of those few places I've ever been that I'm like, I got there and I'm like, I belong here. It's probably because it was mostly populated by Irish criminals. So, it's my peeps hanging out there.
What is the picture?
That's a picture I took just outside of Ober, the Coal River Valley in Tasmania.
Great.
Yeah, stunning. Stunning. The only thing that's really weird is the water's all brown. Even the water that comes out of faucets is brown. Because they have so many trees and tree bark that have really high tannin, that all their water has really high levels of tannin in it, so it's all brown. Everywhere you go, the water's brown. Like the brown, it's like tea. It tastes like tea. Yeah, the water that comes out of faucets, just sort of brown. Yeah, because it's just the way it is there. It's harmless, but yeah, slightly tannic water. I'm not sure if that's the case now, but it was, 15 years ago we go there. But we just go there regularly because I could get like sponsored trips. We get round trip tickets for like $75 from Adelaide. We just go down like, oh, let's go down and go hang out in Tassie. And the Tasmanians are also considerably, in my experience, were considerably friendlier than the Aussies. They were just a lot more kind of pally friendly. It was a really, really fun place to be. Anyway, let's talk about Champagne. This is the main place. Chardonnay is actually one of the lesser plantings. Pinot Noir is the top. Most of Champagne is planted in Pinot Noir. Most people don't know that. They find out really shocking that most Champagne is actually from black grapes. And then Pinot Meunier, Meunier means like miller or moldy. It's got a little, the leaves themselves have fluff on them. And so they have some very limited numbers. They can do 8,000 kilograms per hectare. Hectare is about 2.2 acres. So they can do basically 4 tons an acre, more or less, is about as much as you can grow there. That's what they limit. We don't have those rules here.
What's the average in New Mexico for an acre?
I don't know. It's all over. I would say Washington's probably close to that for most of our wines. Those numbers vary a little bit, but I would say on average, most are around there, especially for red wine. Of course, there's lower and higher. We're around 4 tons an acre. Yeah, but the thing is that tons per acre is a terrible measure of anything. And there's an old anecdote that goes like this. So there's this Napa Valley, because we'll just throw Napa under the bus because it's fun. And he grows the greenest, crappiest cab in all of Napa Valley. He's just this old farmer, been farming forever, and gets a hard time. He just can't sell his fruit because it's just green and crappy. And he grows it at 5 tons an acre. So he hires this really expensive French consultant to come out and tells him, the French consultant comes out and goes, the problem is you're going 5 tons per acre. You must cut that back. You must be on no more, no less, you must be below 2.5 tons per acre. And so, farmer cuts him his $20,000 check plus flights and fees and everything out for coming down to cut his crop now. And so the farmer, being an old farmer, just goes out and cuts down every other vine, and now he grows 2.5 tons an acre of the greenest, crappiest cab in Napa Valley. So it's not, but it's, tons per acre is a myth. It's a myth. It just depends on the size of your canopy, depends on your site, depends on your heat, depends on everything. I mean, there are a lot of wines that you get out of California, like that box wine we've got out there. I think that's running close to 20 tons per acre. They are super heavy because they're trying to make 10% alcohol box wine that tastes like nothing. So who cares? Throwing Chenin Blanc and just cranking these giant clusters out and load the plants up as much as they can. And I have friends that make sparkling wine in Washington. They grow closer to 10 tons per acre for sparkling. They can hang it a little bit heavier because you're not getting it as ripe. You only need to get it to about 16, maybe 18 bricks, and then you're just trying to retain some acid. So they're trying to maximize their yield, because most of the flavors in champagne and sparkling wine, if they're really good ones, and if you've ever had them, they don't smell like fruit. It's all the other stuff that you get from the style. It's the re-fermentation, it's the yeast, it's the dosage. those things are all what bring the character to the wine. So you kind of just want a blank slate. Yes?
So, for vineyards that do a lower tonnage, like if they just like kind of prune back to like one bud, is that mostly gonna be with still lines and like concentrated?
If they wanted to, yeah, they can. You can prune that way. Most of Champagne is head trait, so they're cane pruning and pulling it out. So and then you just kind of fruit thin. But in Champagne, it's all a lie anyway, because in a good year and you have extra, you could declassify it to the next year for a bad year, and then people just keep declassifying and putting piles up in their winery, and then eventually in a bad year they can blend it back in and sell it off. So there's always this it's kind of like losses carried forward in your taxes. You know, if you have a bad year, you can carry that forward and then not have to pay your taxes later. It's kind of a same kind of situation. There's always accounting tricks. Some other champagne terms, non-vintage. Most sparkling wines are non-vintage. Makes their life really easy because the labels are always the same. Nothing to change. Vintage means it's an actual vintage. Very rarely do you see it. When you do see it, you're gonna pay for it. Blanc, and then rosé. Some small portion of red in the blend, usually some skin contact. Rosés are fairly uncommon, and when they are rosé, they're still not very rosé. They're just slightly pink. And you're gonna see the rosé that we made here. If you do come to the sparkling camp this summer, it will be vastly lighter after it goes through secondary ferment, and that color is going to diminish by at least half. And since you're dealing with really underripe Pinot Noir anyway, most rosés in Champagne are just very much just a kiss of color. Very rarely do they have really bright and vibrant color because Pinot Noir is doing it particularly well. And then just the top prestige cuvées, which are the expensive ones.
Why is it don't regulate voyage?
Those are the prestige ones. So those are like the top of the top. They're just really expensive, mostly marketing. Oh yeah, it's all. Oh my God, do you really need to wrap them in gold, plastic, or put them in what's his name, Jean-Paul Gaultier, like the little bags? They look like a little bondage bag of wrapped around the bottle of latex for some of them. Have you seen those? Yeah, it's all. Yeah, I would say that there are no wines that reach quite the level of gimmickry that sparkling wine does. But the thing is, the sparkling wine is about the party. It's about the good time. It's always about a celebration. I mean, so yeah, that stuff's all there.
Sparklers in the bottle.
Sure, why not? Anyway, we'll talk about negotiations. So what's really weird is most sparkling wine, especially champagne, most of it isn't grown by the houses. Most of it's made at a big bulk winery. Or it's made by the little growers and they sell it to the bulk winery, and then you go to a tank farm and these negotiants show up on the day, they all taste the wines, they pick their lots, and then they bid on the lots. And then they buy what they want and bring it back. So it's not like, there are grower champagnes, don't get me wrong, there are people that grow the grapes, do all the process and do the whole thing. But the vast majority of champagne that you buy is all just bulk juice that's blended up and then put together in a factory where they put their house spin on it. And a lot of times, I know that Krug in particular, in style, they actually take 2 vintages or 3 vintages back and dump wine into the wine when they're re-fermenting it to make sure that they're getting the flavor, that style year in and year out back into the wine. So anyway, most sparkling wine is just bulk wine turned into something. And then it's all about the magic of the stuff in that. Real quick on transfer method, I'm only going to talk about this for a second. It's basically the same beginning as sparkling, as traditional method. You make the base wine, you re-ferment it into bottles, and then after that, after it's been re-fermented, you basically send a spike through the bottle, suck the wine out under pressure, let it allow it to come out under pressure, back into a tank. So it's been fermented in a bottle, it's put back in a tank, and then it's kept under pressure, it's filtered, and then put back into the bottle. And there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, every bottle of sparkling wine with the traditional method will taste slightly different. They always do. There's always a little different in fermentation kinetics or something. They're always a little bit different. And so what it allows you to do is have an exactly consistent product because every bottle tastes exactly the same. 2, primarily this was done in Australia. So Australia is far away from anywhere, and they didn't make their own glass for a long time. They had import glass. And so the glass that you need On the front end to the first fermentation, it has to be really thick, really heavy. And those bottles maybe would be, I'll show you at the time, maybe $2 or $3 a bottle for that bottle. But once you degorge everything, the pressure goes from 110 psi, 80. You need a much less robust bottle. So that bottle might only be $1. So what you do is you do all your re-fermentations in the big expensive bottles, and you just keep recycling those forever. And then what you sell is in a lesser quality bottle, and that keeps your cost down. That's primarily why they do it, used to do it. But the other reason they do it is because of this. If you get a true traditional method, I promise you they are not riddling 187 ml bottles down and degorging them. Or 375s, maybe, probably not. And you cannot do traditional method in 1.5 liter and larger bottles because they can't handle the pressure and they'll explode. So most 1.5 liter bottles and up are 2 750s poured together. They degorge them, pour them together, and then sell them. But most of them are not fermented in the bottle, especially the big General bottles and things like that. Those are all just multiple small bottles that have been transferred into a people. Because the thing is about sparkling wine is the tooling is so expensive to get you've got every bottles have different cap sizes. The degorging equipment is very specific. So like most sparkling houses demand that you use this bottle. Like very rarely do they change bottles because that just creates a whole bunch of havoc to all the equipment. So a lot of times they have everything really consistently set up. So when you're doing these large formats, the best way to do it is just to combine, blow and combine a couple bottles and then cork them up. Tank method, it's really easy. You take the base wine, put the sugar and the yeast in, you close the lid, and let the pressure come up. And it comes up in tank, traps the CO2 in, and I'll talk about it a little more tomorrow when I do carboy wineries tomorrow. But then that pressure's in tank. While it's in that tank's under pressure, you hook up your filter and everything, and then you have another tank, and you load that one up to the same pressure as the other tank. So the whole thing is under the same amount of pressure. And then you start filtering. You filter from one tank to the other tank under pressure, and then you bottle on a counter pressure bottling line that's like a beer bottler. So it lets the wine stay under pressure as it goes into the bottle, and then you cap and everything else. That's the way that they make Prosecco, and that's why Prosecco is literally half the price of traditional method, because it's just all made in it's all made in tank. And so we have lots of tank methods. Some of the more famous ones are Riuniti. This was also one of the gateway wines of the 1970s to 1980s. That got boomers drinking wine, make it tonight, make it Riuniti tonight. And it was like very romantic, make it tonight, that 70s kind of way. And it's a sweet 8% alcohol wine made from Lambrusco grapes, and it's delicious. And it's so good. If you have not had it, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's remarkably forgettable, but very enjoyable out of jelly jars. And it goes great with Italian food. It's really good. It is a little sweet, but I'm thinking that kind of hoping we can get sweet wines to come back, because sugar makes wine taste good. And they're not that sweet. They're not like a Coke. It's just a little bit sweet. It's just nice. Tastes good. But the other ones you know of really well are like Moscato di Asti, Asti Spumanti champagnes. All those are all tank method. And we call these moderate quality, although I think tank method wines can be spectacular if they're well made. And I think they can be every bit as tasty. But there's just always this thing about the lees aging in traditional method. You just can't get that in any other method. Ancestral method. What's different about this is you would it's basically making a pet nat. Basically. They're basically the same thing. The only thing that's fundamentally different between a pet nat and a method ancestral is that a method ancestral, you stop the fermentation, usually with cold. The way I stop it is with a centrifuge, and I stop it at 27 grams a liter of sugar, which is like 2.7 bricks basically, but it's like only like 1.5 if you actually do hydrometer. And we get all the yeast out, 100%. And then I come back and I add yeast and I add all the adjuvants and everything like traditional method, and then you rebottle it. But the key difference is you're using the natural grape sugar for that secondary fermentation. You're not using added sugar. And this is a really smart thing to do in Washington where we're at, because our sugar contents are already going to be a little bit higher even with good acid. So it's a smart thing, because then we can just pick at 21 bricks and just go. And it saves you it saves you some time. The downside is, do you know how hard it is to stop the ferment at 27 grams of sugar? It's really hard to get it dialed in right on time. But they've been doing this for a long time. They still do it very commonly, but method ancestral, and this is the reason we call it ancestral is because that's basically the way we started doing this. Pet nat, the only difference is instead of clarifying and adding yeast again, you're just taking a ferment that's rolling and you just bottom it at some level of sugar. And so we're gonna make one. See how it goes. But yeah, you just bottle it while it's rolling, and just the natural yeast and everything else, and you just keep going right on through. And it's a really popular way to do things, but there's a whole bunch of different kinds. And it's really big in the natural wine movement, because when you make a wine that's been re-fermented in a bottle and it's got a crown cap on it, the oxygen factor goes out the window. You don't have to worry about oxidation. It's under CO2 pressure, and usually you're making a wine with low pH, and since it's going to go pretty dry, your odds of things going too wrong go downhill. They don't oxidize as easily. That being said, some of the most atrocious wines I've had in my entire life have all been pet nats. They're getting better. People are starting to figure out how to do it. I do find it interesting that it's like the easiest way to make sparkling wine, but anyway, I'll hold my thoughts on that later. But we'll do one. I'll do one. I'll show you one tomorrow, and then we'll make one too. And then I've got a wild Aussie pet nat that should be ridiculous, hanging out. And then lastly, forced carbonation. This is basically the soda stream of wine. You can do this. Take some wine, put it in your fridge, get it cold, pour it in the soda stream bottle, and spruce it up. Easy to do. It's kind of a fun thing to do if you want to baseline your base wine. I'm going to process that. And you can take your base wine and charge it up, get some CO2 in it, taste it, and see if you kind of like where it's going. Yeah.
I wanted to try that because I really want to get into sparkling. And my question is I know the flavor's going to change when it does ferment in the bottle. How testing and stuff like that, it's not going to be exact. The flavors change. Right?
It is going to change, but it just gives you a good estimation. And then I put this up here because this is A to Z Wineworks, and the reason I put it up here is because it made my wife really angry, because go ahead, yeah.
Is there a way to, I guess, quantify what that flavor change will be like?
Not really. That second, you get better at it because you start to get used to the way that the things change.
Okay.
But sometimes you get surprised. Sometimes you think you did it just right, and you're like, yeah. And then what sucks is, instead of having one thing to fix, now I got like 10,000 little things to fix. And yeah, it happens. That's the gamble of making sparkling. Sometimes you get ferments, you did everything right, and it sticks. And then you've got dead bottles, you dump them back in and start over. It happens. And so, we try our best to make sure that doesn't happen. You get better at having it happen less, but it does happen, But the reason I put that up there is their wines are organically grown on the bottles. If you just go buy it, you think you're buying organic wine. If you look at it really closely, it's Oregon-anically.
Oh, that's
And my wife is a organic commodities inspector for the state of Oregon. And I bought her a bottle and she looked at it and she was like, oh yeah, he had some words, she was fired. Anyway, preparation of base wine. Harvest, best being harvested is really our goal. Harvest parameters somewhere 16 to 20 bricks, high acid. Again, major varieties, we talked about that. Cool regions, long ripening periods. However, every year we're picking early in Champagne. It's getting hotter and hotter. We are warming up, and in continental places like the U.S., which we have really big swings in our weather, we don't notice it as much. But in places that have really consistent climates, every year it just gets a little warmer, a little warmer, and a little warmer, so it's gonna change some things. There's no real reason for this, but this was some of the numbers I had from sparkling wines I made over the years. But basically from somewhere to 20 to 21 bricks. And again, I'm picking a little riper in Washington because our acids are higher and our pHs are a little lower. And then also the orange bars represent Riesling, and Riesling has a pretty low pH in Washington. The pink is Pinot Noir, years I made it out of Pinot, and the green is Chardonnay. And the only reason the Chardonnay went so high was our first year that we never picked it, and we just missed it by like a couple of days. TA though, our titratable cities in juice are high. The actual acids are probably closer to 11 or 12 grams. So we have plenty of natural acid. And you can see that even in those riper years, we still have TAs north of 8. But when you actually look at organic acids, closer to 10 grams a liter. And then our pHs, our highest pH was 325.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's the highest pH. But generally, the Rieslings we bring in, you can take a look at these bars, but 292, 295, 29. So very commonly we're down in the 2s in Riesling. And that's why I used Riesling in Washington, because our pHs are stupid low in Riesling.
So with the TA and pH, what are your target numbers for sparkling?
I want my pH always under 3.3.
Okay.
I like to see it a little bit closer to 3.1, 3.2.
Okay.
And I want my acid somewhere north of 8 grams a liter.
Okay.
Personally. There's no right answer. Some people like a little more than that, but that's where I like it to be. And then I don't mind making a bigger style of sparkling wine, so I'm not afraid for my alcohols to get to 13.5%, which is not unusual for the prestige cuvées in France to get up into that range. I've tested many really high-end sparkling wines that are 13.5% alcohol. It's not unusual. Yeah.
And do you normally do the cuvee method, or is there?
So I would do, because we're doing single vintage, single variety. We would whole bunch press it. We would make a base wine, and then we'd make it out in the fall. I'd make the base wine, and then the way, so like part of teaching is kind of spiritual. You gotta like do the things at the right time. You gotta hit the things, hit the right emotional notes. And so, we make wine and everything else, but then the end of the year, you're gonna get close, whenever we're gonna graduate, the last week of school was sparkling wine. So we do the sparkling wine unit, and the last day of class, we gorge. And so, but as we're doing the sparkling wine unit, the still wine, we bring it out, we do the re-fermentation, we bottle it, and go through the process just like you're going to. And then the last day of class was always, we'd hand gorge in water and shoot each other with wine and have a stupidly fun time, because that's how you gotta end things. It's a good party.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So Cruet has, their sparkling, but or champagne, yes, but it's method champagne.
Method champenois means how we make it in Champagne.
Oh,
So
that's
in America, you can actually still find champagne on some beers, the champagne of beers, which is that one? Miller. Miller's the champagne of beers, but they can never change their label. And then also, I think it says Cook's champagne. If you ever go buy it, it's at the store. Cook's, it's like $5 a bottle. Cook's champagne, and it looks like the label was designed in the 1970s because they can't change it. They're grandfathered in. As soon as they change their label, they have to take the word champagne off, because we signed a treaty saying that we can't use any of their terms to confuse people in marketing. So we can't have, we used to have American ports. You can't call it port anymore because it has to come from Portugal. You can call it port style. So method champenois means it's made in the way of the champagne.
Traditional method.
Traditional method.
Traditional, okay.
Yeah. But I think that sparkling wine is becoming more ubiquitous, and champagne is, still important, but champagne is becoming so expensive and so elitist. I think that many people are just going to start saying sparkling wine and just going to want to drink whatever's local. I don't think they're going to be so concerned about that it comes from there, because, realistically, a pretty average bottle of sparkling is, I say, about $60, $70. A good one's, I say, about $200-300. It's like, come on, that's just I can buy some really nice whiskey for $200 a bottle.
I think everybody just calls it champagne.
Yeah, they do. They
Just
do.
like Coke.
They do.
Nobody calls it Coke, everybody calls it Pepsi, Coke. It's like-
Oh,
so-
yeah.
What kind of champagne do you have here? Yeah, just call it
That's
what it is.
champagne.
Yeah.
Bubbles.
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 Bubbles, sparkling wine, yeah. So pressing, grapes roll bench press, there's a couple ways to do it. You can do it in the mark presses, which is that round one up top. And then they have other ones that are more modern, but they press from the side. They have rams that come into the side, press to the side, release, tumble, then press it aside, and leave some tumble. For the more modern presses, this champagne press they haven't cleaned in 7 years, and they don't really worry about it at this particular house because when you're making pH 2.9 wine, nothing can grow in that shit except yeast. Nothing.
I bet you that thing's full of yeast.
Yep, they don't care. They rinse it off occasionally with some cold water. But when you're making low pH wines, you can get away with murder. You can't get away with just a little bit higher pH.
But the smell.
Y'all don't do it, I tell you. Not every winery's like this, but I mean, it's just wherever you go, and you'll find it when you just work in the industry. Every winery has some different cleanliness standards. I've been to filthy wineries that make delicious wine, and I've been to really clean wineries that make awful wine. You know, spend so much time cleaning they're forgetting to make the wine sometimes. So, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I would say that on par, some level of sanitation gives good consistency, and some of the most god-awful wines I've ever had have come out really great wines.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, just like the smell of that stuff, like I wouldn't wanna be there like
Oh.
all day, working it.
No, rotten old junk. Ugh. So the first 10 liters of ton is thrown out. It's usually high rot and tannin. The next free run is known as cuvee, and it's strictly limited to 512 liters per ton, TONNU, which is metric ton, which is a little bit heavier than an American ton. And then the first portion of pressing is known as the premier tie, which is the good tails. Now, so the next 112.5 liters per ton, and then the hard pressing is known as the tie or the tails. And then they usually say it goes to brandy production, but that being said, I know a lot of sparkling wine houses, they find it, clean it up, and they blend it back in. Because who has to know? So, I actually think this is one I can open. Yeah, copy. Let's see if I get lucky and it lets me do my thing.
YouTube.
There it is. Oh. Somebody else already opened it. I heard that background.
Like and subscribe. No, they're waiting for us to see. Serious waiting for us.
Yeah, but those ones are actually
No,
Right.
kind of, they're clean-ish. They're not.
Everything is destroyed by fermentation.
It's not as clean as you think.
No.
And you wouldn't want to wear your barefoot.
No. You don't know.
Are you barefoot in there? Are you in there? Yep. What do you like?
They pile it back up. And they send it on down. Look how fast it moves.
That seems easier to clean.
Yeah. I don't know if they do anything with pressure juice coming out of it. Eventually it's pressure. See comes the juice. Very oxidative.
So rad.
Yeah.
Is it hydraulic?
Yeah, but this one doesn't sound like it is, but
Air?
usually they are. No, it sounds like it's mechanical, whatever. Yeah, it's hydraulic. You can see the ramp. Yeah, most of them are hydraulic.
Where does that juice go to? Just
A lot of them have the tanks in the ground, or they usually, a lot of times they have the press on the top level, and then down below is the cellar, and then the line goes down in the cellar.
Never politics.
Senator, just be honest.
Apparently I'm,
Are we in the park going?
here we go.
1%.
So we've talked about what happens during pressing. Acid kind of stays the same, but then towards the end, once that potassium interacts, we see our pH go way up. So you see the pH go up at the end on that kind of tail end there. So we have the potassium on the bottom, we have a titratable acidity on top. So potassium goes up, the titratable acidity goes down. Imagine that. We've been over this. So this is where that idea of the tie comes from, the tails. Because acid is like the core being of sparkling wine.
And what is meant by the mixings, the R1 through R5?
These are the different press fractions. So press fraction 1, press fraction 2. This is the third time they've loaded up. And by the fourth and fifth fraction, that's when you start to, remember they're shoveling back to the middle?
Okay.
Primary fermentation, mostly stainless, some oak, some people do oak, but mostly stainless. Some barrel fermentation, and they want to make it really clean, really fast ferments, but we're not fermenting to high alcohol, so it's pretty easy. And we're not looking for super estery, ferments. We just want to get it nice and dry. We want to make sure that it's a really healthy ferment, because we don't want to leave any bad stuff behind for the next generation of wine to come deal with. They have to be very clean fermentations. Baseline considerations, they have to be very cold stable. We're going to talk about stability on Sunday. They have to be cold stable. We can't throw tartrate crystals. Because if they do, boom. You put it in the fridge and it's got a bunch of tartrates, you pop the cork, all the wine comes out on the floor. Mad customers. And also when you're blending, you want to make sure you do your blending early, do your cold stability later. Because if you blend two cold stable wines together, they aren't necessarily going to be stable after you blend them together. Filtration, generally only loose filtration. Do you filter at bar? Just a little bit, just of course.
0.45 actually, to start
Oh,
right before secondary fermentation.
Okay. I tend not to ferment, to filter.
To filter.
I tend not to, because I like the proteins. It kind of helps hold and loosen a little better. But everybody's got their own style. But I just tend not to, yeah.
Does anybody ever take a couple bottles and intentionally add tartrates in it so they're gag bottles to give to a friend that they know will explode?
Well, it's kind of hard because it's going to blow up on you first.
Okay. I didn't know if that was possible, just to okay, just gonna put a little bit of extra tartrate in here.
Well, I do know that the method ancestral that I made is actually a bit of a joke in a way because the pressure's so high, I overshot the sugar on it a little bit. Then when you take the cage off, the cork comes out.
Oh my.
Yeah. Again, then total SO2, we want to be under 100 parts per million. 50 to 60 total is ideal. So different baselines that we did over the years. You can see the average pH was about 304. And then we have a TA of around 9. Our free sulfur would have been around 10 going to bottle. And then our total SO2 on average 63. And if you look at those volatile acidity numbers, they're extremely low. You don't want any VA, because any volatile acidity, any vinegar, when you add bubbles to vinegar.
And is that going to be something where you can expect the VA to be lower because everything is at such a lower pH?
Lower pH, and you're not going to high alcohol. High alcohol is the big driver, and you're usually not taking the wine through mallow. And that malolactic fermentation always kicks VA up a little bit. So you're just taking away all those things. If you're doing low alcohol fermentation, you're not going through mallow. You're probably, and at low pH, you're probably going to have a low VA. Unless mistakes were somehow made. One thing I thought was funny is the yeast don't know math, because I calculated all the conversions over the years on our sparkling wines. But 1 year we were at 21 bricks and ended up at 11% alcohol and converted at 0.55 in white. And then 1 year we had one that come in at 20 degrees bricks and it came out at almost 13% alcohol as the baseline, and it converted at 0.65. So on average, 0.59, which is around that 0.6 number. But on average, that's about where it works out. But You never know. So if you're using bricks as your starting number for alcohol, that's not a good choice. All right. So now we got base wine. Now we got just tirage and re-fermentation. And we're going to do this. I think it's going to help you see this, when we actually just go do it. But again, wine can be fined. A lot of times it is. You clean it up. There's all kinds of stuff done. We can blend wines. But yeast selection is crucial because we are making yeast go to their doom. It's like literally dropping a group of people out in the middle of the Sahara Desert and saying good luck. Because almost all the sugar's gone, the pH is super low, there's already alcohol there, it's gonna start assaulting their cell membranes, they're gonna be pissed off, they don't wanna be there, and we're gonna make them go survive, literally, yeah, absolutely.
Naked and afraid.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That's exactly what it's actually. I actually kind of feel guilty when I'm making sparkling because I'm like this yeast utopian. I want to give my yeast all the advantages, give them beautiful juice, lots of nutrition, make sure that they're healthy and happy. And then when you're making sparkling wine, you're like, fucker, you die. You're gonna have a slow, miserable, terrible. And on top of that, you're gonna put them under a ton of pressure. And it's gonna start making their shapes all oblong. They're gonna get squished, and it's just a really horrible way to, a horrible thing to do to yeast.
Maybe get PETA after you.
What's that?
Maybe the PETA groups after you.
Yeah. God, if they start classifying yeast as
Oh,
we're in
forget
trouble.
it. That's all.
I'm walking around the store dumping out bottles of wine because you're harming yeast. That would just be the day, I tell you what. But
Take acid instead.
But the only other thing that's slightly more evil, and I used to do this in a different lifetime. I can't do it anymore because you get in trouble. But when I made fortified wines, I'd come in with a little Hitler stash on because I'm dumping alcohol in the wine and you're killing them all off. You're committing yeast genocide. You can't. It was supposed to be funny. I still think it's funny, but you can't. These are the things you can't do anymore. But yeah, you basically, when you're fortifying wine, you're just going in and killing trillions and trillions and trillions of life forms. And it's kind of mean.
I actually went to the concentration camp in Auschwitz.
Uh-huh.
1 and 2, it was horrible.
That's a little heavy.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah, I did the Dachau.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's heavy. It's
Yeah.
heavy. Yeah, not I'm glad I did it. I would choose,
I would never go back,
Yeah.
for sure.
Bucket list, check.
Check, that's it.
Moving along. Yeah. So we'll move on from that. But it's a joke when I killed these. It was a joke. It was a joke. I do not hold any of those. I don't hold any of those belief systems. Do not let the haircut fool you. I would have hair if I could. It's not much of an option. It's mostly slid down my back. So anyway, process, we're just gonna add some sugar, we're gonna add some yeast, they're gonna re-ferment, it's gonna trap that alcohol and CO2 in the bottle. That's it. And our goal is to have about 15 grams of CO2 in a bottle, which is roughly 90 psi. Roughly. So quick things to know. Every 4 grams of sugar produces roughly 2 grams of CO2, which is basically 1 atmosphere of pressure. 1 atmosphere of pressure is 14.7 psi. Right, 15 psi. Would you like that? There you go. And so that's how you can calculate how much you need to have. So if you get to 24 grams a liter, you're going to get to 6 atmospheres of pressure, which is roughly 90 psi. But you think about it, if you ever blow up a bike tire at 90 psi, that's a lot. And these can glass. So the thing is, the sucrose must be mixed with wine. With wine, a lot of times people do it with wine. I did water because they get more money for the company. But if you do it in water, you have to add a little acid because we want to break that sugar from the disaccharides and monosaccharides, which we talked about yesterday. Some additions?
So if you do it in wine, does it already have the right amount of acid to do that?
Yeah, and so it depends on your alcohol levels. If you want, and I'm trying to make a really fresh, light, and bright style. I'm kind of hoping to come in under 12, like close to 11% alcohol set then. So we're being fairly aggressive with our water rounds on the front end. But thiamine is useful. A lot of people use thiamine in sparkling wine because it helps the yeast finish fermentation, so they can do the job. You add a little bit of nitrogen, add a little bit of DAP just to make sure that they get through. Also, sparkling wines can get reduced, and reduced sparkling wines, you got bubbles and they smell like farts. That's not fun. We don't want that. Sometimes copper's added. I don't recommend it at re-fermentation. I recommend it if you need to add copper, do it at dosage, but don't do it at re-ferment because copper's kind of toxic to yeast and it can inhibit their fermentation. Some people add it to style, but I don't think it's probably the best idea. And of course, we have these things called adjuvants, and we add all these things in to the wine. I'll talk about them in a little bit. Usually some other things, but sometimes people will add those into the bottle, and then they'll riddle them out later. Yeah.
If yeast is, or if the copper can damage the yeast, will that change any of the smell? Like if they start dying and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, everything changes something.
Okay.
And copper's a powerful tool. If you don't have to use copper, don't. Copper is, we'll talk about copper. It's a whole talk. But copper is just like putting a bomb in your wine. Yeah.
This is from a few slides before, but I just thought about it. In the tank fermentation, how long is the second fermentation? Like how long does it usually sit in the tank?
Usually about 30 to 50 days, which is about how long a bottle fermentation takes as well. Depends on the temperature, depends on what your goals are. Yeah, but usually it's multiple weeks. And same with bottle fermentation, usually 50 to 70 days before you finish going through secondary fermentation of bottle. It takes a long time to finish it up. Again, we talked about yeast, it's got to be really tough, and it also wants to be something that flocculates and wants to settle out well. So you don't want a really fluffy light yeast that doesn't want to settle out. Building inoculation, we're going to do this. So I'm not going to go through it. I've got a how-to sheet. It's in the drive in the lectures. I've got a whole outline of everything we're going to do. You have a recipe should you ever want to make wine. Just scale it up or down. It'll work.
So is it directly scalable?
Yep. Yep. You just have to multiply. It's based on 300 liters of base wine, and you can scale it up or down any way you want.
Have that for red wine too,
Well, you would. Oh no, there's no recipe there.
because it's just all, yeah.
Yeah, it's all. Yeah. I mean, there's a general path of things to do, but basically make juice, clarify juice, ferment juice, how long you ferment it, what yeast you use, and then you finish ferment. And
I'm guessing with the recipe, it's something very scalable so long as you're within that pH range.
but you're gonna make it. See, this is the great thing about sparkling wine. You can make it that.
Okay.
Just push it there. Add the acid, add the water, add the sugar, whatever you need. Just get it there.
Does New Mexico have any climate that we can make a sparkling?
Sure. Everywhere. You just might have to grow more tonnage per acre, but yeah, totally. And you gotta pick it earlier so you get good acid.
Make it a
Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc.
Chenin Blanc, so
Sure.
that's all.
Chenin Blanc is known for having really low pH. Chenin Blanc might be one of the better grapes. Chenin Blanc and Riesling would probably be top notch because they keep their pH really low. So and nobody cares what's in the bottle. So yeah. And of course, this is the most modified wine there is. You can do anything you want. Start with some base wine, and then everything else is secondary. So you can make all the flavors later.
It sounds like champagne's less drama than the other two.
Tons of drama. It's so much drama. It's crazy drama because you got to do all this stuff, and then it's got to be just perfect when you go to bottle, and you can't miss. You can't miss. You can't stop the bottling line. If you got a tank full of wine and it's going, you can't stop. You got to go. If the bottling line breaks, you better get it fixed because now you're going to lose because after you re-ferment it once, you can't do it again. Wine's dead. You can't re-ferment a wine a second time. You only do it once. Because when those yeast die, they basically leave all these little C6 and C8 fatty acids, which are kind of the equivalent of the signs around Chernobyl. Like, don't come here, don't live. They leave signals in the wine for other yeast, don't come here, this is horrible, don't come back. And they'll never re-ferment again. That's why it's almost impossible to re-ferment a wine if you've done it once. Yeah.
Let's say worst case scenario, something like that happens, are you still, if you do like a forced like CO2 carbonation, are you able to save it to sell it?
I gotta go figure one out. I got a problem. I had a house do my wine, sparkling wine for a client, and I wrote the numbers in kilos, and they added the sugar for the syrup in pounds. And they added half as much sugar. So I've got all my wines at like 3 bar, and I don't know, I gotta figure out. So I'm thinking we're gonna transfer method it we have a cidery down the street. I think we're gonna transfer method it back in the tank, have them spruce it up with a and bright tank, and then put it back in bottle with and then I'm gonna make the custom crush facility pay for it, because that's their fault.
You can sterile filter it.
No, it's the fatty acids are in there. Yeah, I mean, you might get lucky, I don't know. It's really hard to get another ferment to go. I'm gonna move quick. We're gonna do this too. We're gonna count yeast with the hemacytometer. There's not gonna show you this real fast. We're gonna do this. I don't need to tell you, because we're gonna do it. And it's just basically we're gonna count yeast cells. The reason it's called the hemacytometer is for counting blood cells. But we use the count yeast. We're gonna do it, so I'm not worried about giving you too much of an explanation, because we're just gonna do it. Yeast cell counts, too many yeast, too much demand, too much flocculation, you get a big old pile of yeast in the neck, you can't engorge it, too few yeast, it won't ferment. So you gotta get your yeast number just right, it's gotta be perfect. Everything's gotta be perfect. You gotta have the perfect amount of sugar, perfect amount of yeast. You gotta have it cold stable, you gotta have heat stable. You've gotta have all your bottles, everything ready to go right now. You get no wiggle room. It is an incredible amount of precision that has to happen right there. So even though you get a huge amount of manipulation, Saturday, when Saturday's over, we'll be very happy when we get this in bottle. Because that is always just a lot of stress making sure you've got everything just so. Riddling aids, basically, they're bentonite, usually calcium bentonite, and algae. The reason we add these to the wine, and we've got it here, the one we're going to use called Clean Spark. I prefer the France version, but I like the pre-mix and I'm lazy, so I don't want to mix it all up. But what it does is it coats the yeast cell and makes it want to not, rejects the charge of glass. So it coats the yeast cell and it makes it really slippery. Basically, it allows the yeast to slide really effortlessly down into the neck of the bottle. If you make sparkling wine and that's what's in the neck of the bottle, you done fucked up. Because that's way too much yeast. It should be like, you shouldn't even be able to see it past the bottle cap when it's filled with that. So, but anyway, I thought that picture was okay. This is what many people that make pet mats end up looking like in the neck of their bottle, because they end up too many yeast. You gotta clarify it a little bit beforehand. But I think we're gonna end up making a pat mat on Friday. So while we're doing this in the background, I think on Friday we'll filter their wine and we'll probably get it in bottle to make their Riesling to pet mat. So we're gonna do that too. So we're gonna do all kinds. We're gonna do traditional method, and we'll do some pet mat. So I don't know how far along the ferment's gonna get by the time we present on Sunday, but we shall see if a week is enough. And maybe it'll be stuck slightly. Maybe it'll just a little let it ferment, maybe it'll be a little sugar, maybe it'll be delicious. You never know. We'll find out.
And have the fun of it.
Yeah. So yeah,
Make bets.
Yeah,
maybe we can do that. Yeah, maybe that's something that's going to happen. But fermentation can last about 50 days. It takes a long time. And I'm going to stop because this isn't all that important. How many size is that? Like a 10 words. So yeah, no, we got to go taste wine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. I'll finish this tomorrow, and then the other presentations will come anyway, and we cut it a little short today, and that's all right.
Wonderful.
20 minutes of technical difficulties each day. Plan. Oh yeah, thank you. I'll get my head up with Ash. Oh, come on, feet.
Thank you.
Come on, feet. Work with me.
Yeah.